Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today what we're talking about is how we can overcome any objection in real estate. Now, if you're like most agents, you have this mindset that thinks, I really hope somebody doesn't object to me. I really hope somebody says my fee isn't too high or my pricing is too low. And we start to get quite nervous when we think of somebody objecting to our service or to our price or to our fee. When in fact, someone is objecting, really what's going on here is there can be some confusion. And how can we actually get to the bottom of that confusion and overcome it? So today what we're going to look at is how you can overcome any objection, truly any objection in real estate. You can just follow this framework, follow it step by step, and regardless of the objection, whether it's buyer, seller, prospecting, you'll be able to overcome the objection. So first off, let's look at the 3 keys for overcoming any objection, and then we're going to jump into the framework. The 3 keys that we always need to keep in mind when we're addressing an objection are these things. First off, curiosity. We have to operate with a curious mindset. Now, what exactly does that mean? What does it mean to be curious when it comes to an objection? Well, sometimes people are going to object to something when in fact their true objection is something different. So what's an example of this? Seller says to you, they object to the price. They object to the price that you're suggesting. Well, is it that they're objecting to the price, or do they understand that your pricing is actually quite accurate, but they're objecting to the fact that the next home they're looking to buy is now going to have to be smaller? Because in their mind, they thought maybe they were going to get $900 for their home, but in fact, they're going to get $800. So that changes what they're going to buy. We have to be curious as to what's actually driving this. And you'll see exactly how this plays out as part of the framework. The next part is empathy. We have to be empathetic. Now, when you think through the process of buying or selling real estate, you might do it every single day. So for you, it's just second nature, but for them, that's not the case. And I remember the very first home that I purchased. I remember everything about that. And the reason I remember so much about it is because there's so much emotion built into that process. So when it comes to handling objections, we need to be empathetic towards the buyer or seller. Now, what does it mean to be empathetic? It means truly validating whatever concern they have. We're going to see this in the framework as well, that we need to validate whatever concern is on their mind. And then the third key is actively seeking objections. So we call this the Canadian Objection. And I say this because I'm Canadian, so I know that this happens in Canada, but it happens everywhere. And the Canadian Objection is truly this concept of somebody objecting to your service, but not telling you why. So maybe they object to your price, but they don't say they're objecting to your price, or they object to your fee, but they don't say they're objecting to your fee. This is the Canadian Objection. How do we actually overcome the Canadian Objection? Well, it's actually quite simple. As we're moving through the process with somebody, we need to be asking them if there are any concerns on their mind, big or small. Now, when you ask that question, people are going to feel free to bring up small concerns or what they think might be small concerns. So as you're going forward with the process, you always want to be asking your client, what are the concerns or fears that are currently on your mind, big or small? Now, what this is going to do is actually generate objections. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't want to generate objections. I don't want objections if there's no objection there. But the objection is there. They're just not voicing it. And so really, we want the best opportunity that we can to actually try and handle that objection. And that's why we use this framework. So let's jump into the framework here and how we can actually start to overcome objections. So when the objection is presented to us, what is it that we need to do? Well, first off, we need to clarify. We need to clarify what that objection is. Now, when you think of clarifying the objection, you might be thinking somebody says, your fee is too high, and you say, why? Isn't that clarifying? Well, no, it's not, because as soon as we use the word why, the individual is going to become defensive. It's us versus them. And when we're handling objections, we need to be on the same team. So how do we actually clarify with a little bit more structure, a little bit more empathy, a little bit more curiosity? Well, we're going to do so by simply saying to them, can you help me understand what's causing this concern? Can you help me understand what's causing this concern? Now, that line is going to allow them to open up and to explain where it is that they're coming from. After you've clarified, you're now going to move into validate. And so this is now empathy. So we move from clarification, which of course is curiosity, to validate, which is empathy. And we're going to say, that's a valid concern. It sounds like you are X. So we want to label what it is that they're feeling. And as soon as we do this, you're going to see a smile on their face. And they're going to think, okay, we're on the same team. We're going to be working through this together. And so we clarify and then validate. Now, after we validated their concern, we move on to permission to overcome. Now, this is a step that almost every agent is going to miss, and is one of the most powerful sentences that you can use when you're handling objections. So once you've actually validated the concern, now you want to move to address the concern. But it's a little bit jarring for the client to move straight from, that's a valid concern, and then let me tell you why you're wrong. So instead, what we need to do is we need to bridge the gap towards an actual address of the objection. So how do we do that? We use permission to overcome. Now, how do we actually ask for permission to overcome? It's very simple. All we have to say is this. After we validate the concern, all we say is, can I bounce a few ideas off you? Can I bounce a few ideas off you? And then they're going to say yes, of course. And then now you can address the objection. This is extremely powerful because now, again, we're putting ourselves on the same team as the client. We are putting ourselves on the same side of the table, and it's not defensive. I'm bouncing a few ideas off you. I'm bouncing a few thoughts off you. This isn't me telling you why you're wrong. Instead, it's let's work on this together. The next step is addressing the objection. Now, this is the part that most of our minds go to, is somebody objects to fees. So then how do we actually let them know that maybe paying our fee is the best decision? Well, there's three different things that you can do as part of the address. There's three different structures that you can use, and they tend to work in any scenario you have. The first one is a reframe. So when it comes to a reframe, we're turning a negative into a positive. So somebody objects to the fee being too high. How can we reframe that negative into a positive? Well, we could say that if you go with a discounted model, then you may get discounted services and end up leading to a lower price. Or if we go more of the standard model, we minimize that risk. And so really what we're doing here, we're reframing the concept of fees as actually being a positive because it's reducing the risk of a failed transaction or a lower sale price. So that's the reframe. We're turning a negative into a positive. A common example that you may have heard before is if you're a newer agent and somebody's objecting to the fact that you're newer. Well, how is being newer a potential positive? Well, you likely have more time. Maybe you have new, fresh ideas on how to approach a listing or helping a buyer. And so we need to turn that negative into a positive. Now, the next strategy that you can use if you're not using the reframe is the multiple choice. The multiple choice is a really, really good strategy. And what we're doing here is we're contextualizing the objection. So we're giving people two roads to choose from. So what's an example of this? Well, let's take into consideration the seller's objecting to our price. Well, we can give them two roads. Road number one is we can basically say, we can come in at the higher price, and we have to be comfortable with the risk. With higher price, we may have lower interest and lead to price reductions, which then leads us to a lower price than what we initially suggested. Or we come in at the market range and lower the risk of potential price reductions and hopefully drive the most amount of interest possible. So which one of these two paths makes the most sense to you? So you see what we're doing here is we're providing two different options. This is the multiple choice. And sometimes there's three, but generally there's two different options. Either we can go the overpricing route and risk not having the interest, or we could go the market route and minimize the risk of low interest. Which one of these is the best path for you? Now, I love this one because we're not actually coloring their decision. They can make a decision, and if they want to go with the overpricing route, let's do it 100%. Let's just be very comfortable with the risks that are associated with this decision being made. And the final one that we can use as part of the address is feel, felt, found. Now, you may have heard of feel, felt, found before, and in fact, if you've ever been on a sales call and you've objected to somebody and that salesperson was a little bit more advanced or has done their scripting and role playing and objection handling, they may have used this on you. Feel, felt, found is a very common objection handling strategy. And it works like this. It's really using a story. So basically you're saying, we've had previous clients feel this way. What they felt was X, but what they found is Y. So let's explore this with a little bit more detail. Let's say that we had somebody again who wanted to potentially overprice. We can use feel, felt, found. And what we would say is, we've had clients who feel like they should list higher. What they felt is that this would lead to more money in their pocket, but what they found is eventually, after months on the market, we had to reduce below the initial suggested range. So you're using really third-party stories with feel, felt, found. You're using stories, but we're using this framework of feel, felt, and then this is what they found. And really what this is going to help us do is we're not telling them anything. We're just explaining a story of how this played out previously, and this is what actually ended up being the result. So these three things are ways that we can address the objection. We have the reframe, we have the multiple choice, and we have feel, felt, found. Now, once we've moved through address, we're going to move to our final step, which is confirm. And so at the final step, we want to confirm an unbiased resolution. So we don't want to lead into this and say, has that answered all your questions? Instead, we want to frame it like this. Is there any part of your concern that is left unaddressed? And then we want to pause and we need to be quiet because we want the person to talk more. Typically during objection handling, all we're thinking about is what we're saying. But in fact, we really need to be fixating on the fact that we need them talking more. We want the client talking more during an objection handling process. Now, all you have to do is follow this framework for any objection that you encounter. If you start with the framework and then use one of the 3 addresses, you can handle any objection under the sun. Thank you very much for watching or listening to this episode. Remember, you can reach out anytime at revrealestateschool.com, or I'm on Instagram at the.michael.montgomery. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next lesson.